Hey, what's up bros? Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video. It's Bro Vinny here. Today, we are finally gonna talk about skill triggers. How often does it trigger? Which Pokemon will trigger more? If they have the same sub-skills, do skill specialists actually have 2 times the rate? Or is it some sort of other multiplier? And I'm just gonna be upfront with you guys from the start. I still don't fully understand it, but I will do my best to shed some light on this. Let's get some basic knowledge out of the way first. There are 12 main skills in this game that every Pokemon will have one from this list. I pulled this list from Cerebi. Some of these skills are very similar. Charge Strength S, for example, is very similar to Charge Strength S. One of them is a range and one of them is a set number, in case you've never noticed before. Similarly, Dream Shard Magnet S and Dream Shard Magnet S are very similar to each other. Once again, one of them is a set number of drops of Dream Shards, the other is a range. Why the game does it this way, I have no idea. Secondly, every main skill can be leveled up to level 6, so each one can be leveled up 5 times. And as you level up the main skill, the power of that main skill goes up. Additionally, if you catch a Pokemon at its base evolution, for example, Igglybuff, every time you do evolve the Pokemon, the main skill goes up 1 level. So if you catch Wigglytuff fully evolved, it will start at level 1 main skill. So wherever you can, and it's a skill specialist where you do need the skill a lot, you should be focusing on catching the base evolution so that you can evolve it yourself. Or alternatively, you can use a main skill seed to level up the main skill. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch this video here. You can also use sub-skill seed if you've got skill level up sub-skill. And it is very important that you know how much your Pokemon will need to level up the main skill and how much of it can be done naturally. So by that I mean, take this Jigglytuff for example. I evolved it from Igglybuff twice, so that means the main skill should be level 3. I did additionally drop a main skill seed on this Jigglytuff, making it a total of level 4 main skill. Now, because of its skill level up M, it will naturally get to level 6 because skill level up M increases main skill level by 2. It is unfortunate that this is unlocked at level 100, but this Jigglytuff doesn't need any more main skill seeds, unless I really want to use that main skill at a higher level before it gets to level 100. So always check your sub skills and make sure your Pokemon can't actually naturally get to level 6 by itself before you drop a main skill seed. And one more thing is that a Pokemon's inventory, a Pokemon's carry limit, once it's full, it can no longer trigger a main skill. That doesn't mean that it cannot trigger a main skill if you have it banked from before the inventory is reached. And I'm clarifying this point because after I made this video, there are a few comments being a bit confused saying, oh, in the morning, all my Pokemon have full inventory, yet they can still trigger main skill. In fact, there's a very high chance of them triggering a main skill. But that's only because before they reach the carry limit, they have banked some main skills. Alright, so with all that out of the way, finally onto the main point of today's video. How frequently do main skills trigger? And unfortunately, it's not a simple answer. It is not as simple as saying skill specialists trigger twice as much either, because there are several exceptions, including Slaking. But the best way to visualize how often a main skill can trigger is to use the Raynon's calculator. So in a more recent update in Raynon's calculator, and I'll leave a link in the description below, if you click into Team, you will find Skill Trigger Analysis. Now, the numbers within this skill trigger analysis is a ratio. It is not the amount of times a skill triggers. And I believe the only thing you can get from this calculator, this part of the calculator, is to know how often a Pokemon triggers a main skill relative to another Pokemon, which can still be really helpful because if I know how often my Wigglytuff triggers, I can say how often Sylveon, a similar type of main skill, would trigger. And the way to use this calculator is to first select the Pokemon that you're going to make as a comparison. So for example, if I want to compare Sylveon against my Wigglytuff, what I do is I first choose the Wigglytuff at the top of the page, scroll down a bit, and then complete the stats page. So whatever stat your Pokemon, your Wigglytuff has. For example, you need to input the level 10, 25, 50, etc. sub-skills, and also the nature. Now, just for the sake of comparison, I'm going to leave this Wigglytuff at level 1 and have no sub-skills, no nature, just so everything is held the same when I compare. Then you scroll down a bit more, and you choose your comparison Pokemon. So what I've done here is I've selected Wigglytuff again, and Sylveon. Why I chose Wigglytuff again is just to show that if I compare Wigglytuff to Wigglytuff, it should be exactly 1-to-1. And that is indeed what we see here. So this number is the relative skill trigger rate compared to the first Wigglytuff that I picked. And on this chart here, you can see that Sylveon has a slightly better trigger rate than Wigglytuff if all else is held the same, making Sylveon a slightly better main skill healer. Now I'm going to make a second comparison here. I've gone back to my original comparison Wigglytuff and I made it level 9, so not quite reaching a sub-skill yet. Then I compared to a Wigglytuff at level 1 and a Sylveon at level 1, and you can see that compared to a level 1 Wigglytuff, actually a level 9 Wigglytuff, and it's because of a slightly improved frequency or helping speed, the rate of trigger actually increases. So what this is saying, and this is what the calculator does, is that it accounts for the speed of a Pokemon. The smaller your frequency, in other words, the greater the speed, the more times a Pokemon can trigger its main skill. However, the speed alone cannot determine the trigger rate because it depends on a hidden value that's not shown by the game, what the skill value is. Now the third example I'm going to take now is putting Wigglytuff, my comparison Wigglytuff at level 10, and now it's reached this skill trigger M sub-skill. In other words, it has an increased rate of triggering a main skill. And all of a sudden, it's now much better than a Sylveon that doesn't have that main skill, and certainly better than itself, which doesn't have that main skill and at a lower level. So when deciding which one's a better healer, sub-skills are very important, aside from the base frequency and the hidden skill value. And you can play around it with this calculator yourself. You can input what about main skill nature up if we put that in, how much improvement that would be. But I can tell you from my own testing that the amount that nature contributes is about 15% improvement in the skill trigger rate if the main skill nature is up. And now that we know that speed of help also affects the main skill trigger rate, what if I get a nature like Calm Nature that has reduced speed but higher main skill chance? Does that ultimately improve the trigger rate or reduce the trigger rate? And you can play around with these numbers. In this case, having main skill chance up is better for main skill even if speed of help is down in a nature. I'm not going to go through every single scenario. The best way is for you to just go to the calculator and play around with the numbers yourself. But if you're still confused about certain situations or how these numbers work, come to my Discord, let me know, or comment in the comment section below. And one more thing you should know about this skill analysis calculator is that it doesn't compare between different sub-skills. And it doesn't make sense to, because Ingredient Magnet S doesn't do the same thing as energy for everyone. And perhaps it's a way for the developers to balance the game. So Charge Strength M, if it were to not trigger as much, would actually be the same as Charge Strength S. And unfortunately, so far we don't have a calculator that compares between different sub-skills. However, I do want to show you something interesting, and it is related to several exceptions or extreme cases where skill triggers are exceptionally high. Now let's take Umbreon as an example. It's a skill specialist that restores its own energy. If we compare it to every other Pokemon that also restores their own energy, its trigger rate is about more than 5 times that of Raticate, more than 3 times that of Arbok, more than 2 times that of Tyranitar, and 3 times that of Altaria. Granted, none of these are skill specialists, but even then, they are more than 2 times the trigger rate. And having seen Sylveon earlier being slightly better than Wigglytuff, and having had a look at some of the other evolutions, I'm convinced that the developers favor evolutions just a tiny bit. But let's talk favoritism a little bit more. Lucario has the same main skill as Persian, and they are both skill specialists, and they're both 2-stage evolutions. Lucario is generally at base speed 10% faster than Persian, yet at base, so if everything else is held the same, the base trigger rate for Lucario is 25% more, or nearly 25% more than Persian. And this time we're comparing both as skill specialists. So in actual fact, even if you have the exact same skill, exact same evolution, even if you account for the differences in the speed of help, the trigger rate is still a little different between different Pokemon. And that is where the hidden value, the hidden skill value lies, which the game does not give us. And the final exception, the final example we're going to go through today is Slaking. It came to light in recent days that Slaking has an exceptionally high skill trigger rate for Ingredient Magnet S, and it is exceptionally high relative to a berry Pokemon, which it is, a berry specialist. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Vaporeon as our point of comparison here. So Vaporeon is our base. Vaporeon is an Ingredient Magnet S skill specialist. And I've chosen Charizard as our comparison Pokemon, which is an ingredient specialist. So we're not expecting the skill trigger rate to be very high. So we're looking at about 3 times the trigger rate of Ingredient Magnets with Vaporeon than Charizard. However, what's interesting is that Slaking is 2 times more likely to trigger the same skill as Charizard, yet it is a berry specialist. Yes, it's not as likely as Vaporeon to trigger the same skill, but for a berry specialist, this is very interesting. So while in the early days, we talked about how Vigoroth has a 53-minute frequency at base, Slaking actually goes up to 1 hour 3 minutes. So this is Slaking's base frequency here. Back then, the general advice was to not evolve Vigoroth, because your Pokemon can actually get a bit worse. Sure, there are still advantages to evolving, like increasing carry limit, which is not that important for berry specialists anyway, and increasing the level of the main skill. Again, not that important if you can drop a main skill seed. But now knowing that Slaking behaves like a skill specialist, or almost as good as a Vaporeon, definitely much better than a Charizard, there's a lot more reasons to evolve Vigoroth. Because Vigoroth itself doesn't get that strange skill boost. It's only Slaking. So only when you fully evolve this Pokemon do you get that boost in the skill trigger rate. So don't expect Ingredient Magnet S to trigger with a high chance with Slakoth or Vigoroth. It would only happen when you get to Slaking's level. So one of the recommendations is that if you've got a Vigoroth that is berry focused, it's got berry finding S, help speed up, all of that, then you shouldn't evolve, because you want that Vigoroth to remain a very focused berry farmer, retaining its relatively good speed. But if your Vigoroth or Slakoth has skill level up, skill trigger, or main skill up nature, then you should evolve it to Slaking because it would stack with the fact that it's more like a skill specialist. In fact, it's about 4 times more likely to trigger ingredient Magnus S than it is for Vigoroth. And that's all I have to say for today. If this video helped you understand skill trigger rate a bit more, please leave a like and make sure you subscribe if you want to learn more about Pokemon Sleep. And in the upcoming videos, I will also explain how to use other parts of the Rainon's calculator.